Why does it take so long to come forward? Because we try repeatedly to address this shit at the time, in the moment, to follow the processes, to work within the system, which has its own timetable, and that takes months and years. And we have faith that by following the appropriate processes, we are doing the right thing, and that things can be resolved that way. That's what we've been told. Do the right thing, do it the right way, you know? Don't go blasting on social media, do things the right way. And so we have faith that that's the way to get things done, until we realize it's not. Because the people in the position to actually change things for the better are determined to bury us rather than come clean. And I don't have the funds or the resources that Lively has to wage a legal battle. After 2 years of trying to work within the legal system, faced with the option of take the money and sign an NDA, or take this to court and have it drawn out for years more, with the only likely resolution to be financial compensation for myself. And it would probably involve, you know, years of further character assassination attempts, private detectives following myself and my family throughout the length of the case. I took the third option, say no to the money, say no to the NDA, and walk away from the legal system altogether. Because the system is not set up to protect me or people like me, or to make institutional change. It's not set up for that. It is set up to run on money. It's about money. That's what it is. And it took me a long time to realize it. There's a lot of reasons why it takes a long time to come forward. I know what it's been like in my case. I imagine that Lively similarly assumed that she had taken the appropriate steps and handled it appropriately, until she realised that it wasn't handled, and that Baldoni and Wayfarer had hired a PR rep notorious for astroturfing. Baldoni had built his public persona and career on being not just one of the good guys, but being one of the best guys, the best ally, a feminist with a capital F. She was contracted to steer clear of the topics of domestic violence in promoting the film. Meanwhile, he began speaking earnestly about the importance of women and victims of abuse being heard, and of men taking accountability. My former bosses have also built a reputation as being champions of women. The reality of what it was like for me, who for the first few years was the only female front-facing employee, and from the very first month of my employment, I'd been pushing for greater access and diversity initiatives. I had been creating those initiatives. I'd been running them. I had been pushing for harassment and inappropriate language and behaviour from other staff who were all male, the largely male clientele, and also the male management, to be handled responsibly. I was doing that in such isolation as the only woman. The reality of what that was like for me, pre-Me Too, for a couple of years there, how isolating and frankly how dangerous that was for me, was and is an uncomfortable truth. That now that those diversity initiatives that I pushed for, created and led during those years have resulted in a much less male, cis, straight dominated environment. It's a much more diverse environment now. The success of those initiatives that I created has attracted millions of dollars in government funding and public donation funding, very much relying on the reputation of the organisation as a safe and diverse space. The truth of what it was like for me is not just uncomfortable now, it's a threat, because that truth threatens their entire reputation and their source of income as feminist champions and allies. And I can only assume that that realisation is what prompted them to come after me after I had already graciously stated my intention to quietly resign over the ongoing and long-standing ethical issues that I had, the conflict that I had in promoting the institution to women and the LGBT community, knowing that it didn't adhere to standards of safety that I felt it warranted, particularly if you were encouraging those communities into the space. So maybe that's why I had an early sense of what Baldoni was about, what he was doing. In mid-August, a friend asked me if I'd seen some of the online commentary about Lively and what I thought, and I was like, oh, look, I've seen some footage of the premieres where the female cast appeared together and Baldoni, the male director, producer, star, appeared separately. I'd also seen a report that Baldoni had hired Melissa Nathan at the end of July. So I had the opposite take to what my friend expected, who was thinking, oh, Lively's terrible. I said, regardless of how clumsily the cast are promoting the film, I suspected that something very dark had gone down behind the scenes from Baldoni's side. Not because, believe all women, because all women are perfect, or, you know, because I'm a huge Lively fan, although I like her well enough, but it wasn't anything to do with that. I recognised something in the cast's faces when they were asked about him. It's like a split-second freeze. So probably most people, I assume most people know about, you know, the trauma responses, fight, flight, freeze. My go-to is freeze, primarily. I can fight when I've caught my breath and my bearings, but my instinctive trauma response is freeze. The whole time I was working in this job, I was in a state of continual trauma. And I was trying to fight for things to be safer and better. But I was also in a state of continuous freeze, really. And it was really only during the COVID lockdowns when I had like an extended period of time where I had physical space from being physically present in a building where so much had happened to me, that I was able to catch my breath and to recognize this is really messed up. This is really traumatic and it needs to end now. I can't go back there. Not like this. I can't. At that time, I still had faith that management was being straight with me when I went to tell them that explicitly in late 2020 before the lockdowns lifted. So over a Zoom call, only one of the directors was there. The less problematic one, the one I thought had integrity. They said they agreed that these issues had been badly mishandled for years and wanted the same changes that I wanted. They said they were excited about it, about working with me on it, and about giving me a real voice when it came to policy and overseeing safety, ideally as a paid position, potentially if they couldn't work that out as an unpaid board member. Over the following 18 months, I followed up and followed up and followed up multiple times, and I kept getting apologies back, which I have written records of. But, you know, can't show you that or I'll get sued. As I kept being stonewalled and things kept being delayed, and it became clearer and clearer that, like, I was not going to have a voice. I was not going to be in a position to ensure people's safety. I gradually withdrew bit by bit, piece by piece, until I was basically not there at all. And each time I withdrew, I told management why and what I was waiting for and what I would need to return or to stay there. Eventually, it got to a point where I wasn't even getting any apologies for the delay anymore. It was just like total silence for like 6 months or something. No, longer than that. A long time. So eventually it became clear that through the rumour mill, that the perception was, which I heard on the grapevine, was coming from management. And this was coming from staff members that were still there, but also just people in the wider community. The perception was that I was apparently either too ill, either physically or mentally, to work at all, or that I'd been let go for some reason. And when I was reached out to and asked about this, I didn't want to expose the organisation because I was still trying to fix things. Oh God, I feel sorry for poor little old me. So naive, because I still wanted to give them the chance to correct it. I wrote of my intention to resign clearly in May 2022, and why, after 18 months of back and forth about when exactly my voice would actually become a part of safety policy and procedure discussions, I wanted to leave with dignity and on my own terms. And not under the cloud of vague rumours and the legacy of all the work that I had done there being erased and co-opted by the men who'd made things so difficult and unsafe for me to work there. Didn't actually say that last part, but it was implied. I was trying to be gracious and leave with dignity, but that's what it was about. The idea that I was too ill or stressed out to work at all is demonstrably untrue, because I was working throughout 2021 and 2022. I just wasn't working for them. I was sick and I did get surgery, but I'd had surgery before while I was working for them, and I was back working there within a few weeks. You know, like, the reason I was not there was because I ethically couldn't be there knowing what I knew, and they knew that. They knew that. Justin Baldoni, I saw some talk which went viral, him discussing male vulnerability, and I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. This was at the time, it was one of those things that was unusual, anyway, I think I started following him on Instagram or something. But really quickly, Justin Baldoni built a brand around himself as an enlightened, reformed man, a man who was a champion for women. Something felt off about him. The fact that he was making a career out of being a feminist and was so worshipped, honestly. Like, it felt like his social media following worshipped him for it, which, trust me, does not happen to female feminists. I remember seeing a video where he was crying and talking about how his wife had given him so many chances to be a better man. And I just thought, I've seen this before. I've seen this from my employer, in fact, thanking me so much for helping him become a better man, for the thankless emotional labour of continually educating him in the face of resistance and sexist, stubborn immaturity. These are his words, by the way, not mine, though I don't disagree. I remember seeing this video of Baldoni and just thinking, but why do you need so many chances? And where's the room for her vulnerability and her mistakes? And this is the pattern of abusers. They harm and then they cry or they get emotional and they apologise and they promise to do better. And it's really compelling and it's really seductive, because we want that to be true. We want them to do better. We want things to be better. We always want things to be better. We want to believe. So it's compelling and it's seductive and it's dangerous. And I went through that with my bosses so many times. And I look back now and I think, how did I not see it? How did I not see this as a cycle of abuse? Why didn't I leave earlier? Because the apologies were so heartfelt and the promises to do better were so compelling. And then the swift amnesia that it had ever happened was so convincing that it had me doubting myself over and over and over again. I was in a classic cycle of abuse, and that's why I couldn't see it, because I was in it. So thank God I kept the receipts. The receipts that I can't show anyone. When they denied knowledge of anything, what I referenced in my email in May 2022, and I told them I intended to resign officially, and they were like, we don't know what you're talking about. Again, I was just thought, am I actually crazy? Am I imagining this? And I went through the receipts. I went through the emails, the Slack messages, the text messages, the diary entries, the social media posts, the comments, 6 years worth at that time. And I read it all in one go over like a week. And it hit me like a ton of bricks because reading it all in one go, I realised this was so much worse than I have been telling myself it was. I just shut out so much because I've been in a state of freeze and I'd been trying to survive. I was numbing myself to what I was experiencing over and over again, and reading it all at once. Reading it all at once actually landed me in an emergency short stay at the hospital. After a week of reading all of this, a week of intense anxiety where I was unable to stop. I was just trying to show myself, you're not crazy, you're not crazy. I was unable to eat or sleep for a week, and I ended up in grave need of sedation. When I reached the emergency room, I was throwing up just from attempting to sip bits of water. And my body had gone into a state of shock and was convulsing. You know, I've never experienced anything like that in my life. That was hideous. That was in June 2022. Then I had to be very gentle with myself. I had just started to write myself a little bit, just started to get back on track. When the attack part of DARVO came, DARVO, for anyone who doesn't know it, stands for Deny, Attack, Reverse Victim into Offender. That's a tactic that abusers use, and it's one that was used on Blake Lively as well. The formal investigation into my misconduct was open in mid-July 2022, after attempting to believe that it was some misunderstanding in good faith, until their own words, and the evidence that they had showed me proved it to be a directed, targeted phishing expedition and an excuse to threaten and discredit me using bogus legalese and blatant lies about security audits and massive data breaches. I recognised the exact steps that they had taken and why. I informed them. I was aware of those steps, what they were, and I requested that they cease and desist, because at that point I was at risk of being hospitalised again, because again I was shocked that they had taken things that far. I said I would be happy to directly answer any questions that the relevant authority had. They didn't. They just used that authority as an excuse to intimidate me. They weren't even answering to that authority. The threat that I apparently posed just disappeared overnight, and no actual authorities were called in, even though I urged them, if their concerns were real, I urged them to actually go to the authorities, and I would then continue to work with the authorities. I said, if you genuinely have concerns about safety and security, I urge you to in fact report it to the authorities. If any actual authorities had been brought in, they would have seen exactly what I'd seen: a targeted attempt to discredit a whistleblower and a victim of harassment. So I'm not surprised that they didn't actually go to the authorities. Anyway, one of the sad things about all this is that, like, so many people have only had great experiences with Baldoni, and with my former bosses too. I think it's entirely possible that someone can be great to some people or to a lot of people and not to others or to a few. I also think that some people can be great when they're simply workers or artists and not in positions of responsibility and authority. Not everyone's built for management. Not everyone should be in a position of responsibility and authority and power. Not everyone is going to use their power responsibly. My former bosses repeatedly told me that they were not managers, they weren't built for managers, they didn't want to be bosses. They resented the responsibility of their positions, but they were enamoured with the reputation it gave them, the career boosts, the profile boost, the status, and eventually, and currently, the flattering idea of themselves as champions for women's rights and opportunities. There are a lot of women, a lot of queer people, trans people. There's a lot of marginalised people who really look up to them and are grateful to them. Sadly, it's still one of the better places. I mean, largely based on the work that I did, but still. And there are definitely, there's heaps of women that they've given opportunities to. But here's the thing, men who feel the need to punish women who speak out and push back and reward women who don't do that. Women who may see no need to speak out if they haven't witnessed the issues firsthand, or, maybe they're just not willing or inclined to. How can I blame them for that after what I've been through? I'm just saying there's any number of reasons why, other women may not be as difficult as me. Well, men who selectively support and punish women in this way to protect and bolster their own reputations and to erase those who know uncomfortable truths about them, that's not championing women's rights. That's not being an ally. It's not. Men who co-opt and erase and trade upon the work done by the women they employ, in my case, the one woman that they employed at the time, in what was for those first few years, a really male-dominated environment, or let the world tell them and kind of accept it as their due that those hugely successful diversity initiatives were actually their own and not the work of the one woman. They're not feminist champions. They're not good men. Men who centre themselves and only celebrate women who either don't know or don't care about their misdeeds are not good men. No matter how many women they give opportunities to, they're not. And they're not safe men. And I know that's really hard for a lot of people to hear because you want to believe in them. I get it. I did too. I really did for so long. So yeah, I clocked Baldoni really quickly. And honestly, I kind of wish I hadn't, because I almost wish I hadn't had the experience to see it so quickly and so clearly. Because I used to assume the best about people to the point where people would make fun of me. I would give everyone second, third, 100th chances.